deadly serious matter, a funny trial. Sam Bowers was represented by a guy by the name of Travis Buckley. That's him on the right there. And Travis Buckley, the thing you have to know for the rest of this to make sense, Travis Buckley represented all those lawyers back, not only represented all those Klansmen back in the 60s, okay, so he was like the Klan lawyer back then. He was also in the Klan, like he was a leader in the Klan. So not just a lawyer for the Klan, but a leader in the Klan. You got that? Okay, all right. So Buckley is questioning Billy Ray Pitts about this planning meeting that took place prior to the attack on Vernon, Dahmer. And so he's asking about it. Now, who all was at that planning meeting? Pitts is like, let's see. I was there. Sam Bowers was there. Devers Nix was there. Well, you were there.
Oh.
And Buckley's like, objection, Your Honor. You know, I've covered a lot of trials in my life as a reporter. That's the only trial I ever covered where a witness implicated the defense lawyer in the case. Not surprisingly, Sam Bowers was convicted in that case and sentenced to life in prison. The next case I got involved with is one we've already talked a little bit about, the Birmingham church bombing case where the 4 little girls were killed in that. And as was mentioned just a while ago, not only these girls, but also one more that's sometimes forgotten. That's Sarah Collins, who was blinded by the blast. In fact, the name of the lesson that day was The Love That Forgives. That's something. September 15th, 1963. One of the last living suspects in the case is a guy by the name of Bobby Cherry. And I just started writing about other cases they were looking at and other kind of things, and I talked to him briefly one day, and so he contacted me and wanted to talk to me. And he lived near Tyler, Texas. And I'm originally from the schizophrenic town of Texarkana, so I knew where it was. And I can make fun of my hometown, kind of, anyway. So I drove over from Mississippi, met him and his wife, took him out for barbecue because, well, I guess that's what you take Klansmen out for, I'm not really sure, but so we went out, we had barbecue, and we talked. He's like, I didn't have anything to do with that church bombing. I left that sign shop. And for those who've actually been to the church, the sign shop he's talking about is like 2 blocks from the church. It's also where they made the bomb. So he's like, I didn't have anything to do with that church bombing. I left that sign shop 9:45 because I had to get home and watch wrestling. Can't make this stuff up, I swear. And even pulled out this sworn statement. Yes, I remember that night we're all sitting around watching wrestling. So, you know, and so I got back to the newspaper the next day and talked to our library and Susan Garcia and said, just check with the Birmingham News and see what was on TV that night. Next day I got an email from Susan that says, there was no wrestling. So Bobby Cherry was arrested in that case. And he was convicted in that case as well. And given 4 life sentences. 1 for each one of those little girls. The next case I got involved with, Sam Bowers. Remember what I told you before, someone tells me I can't have something I want a million times worse. Sam Bowers hated the press, never ever gave an interview, ever. But I found out he gave an interview with the Mississippi Department of Archives and History, but it was sealed. So I wanted that interview. Developed sources finally got that interview, and he was talking about, he was also the one, you know, that ordered the killings of the 3 civil rights workers in the Mississippi burning case that I mentioned earlier. So he was one of 7, back it up, just keep it there. Back it up, keep it there. There were 7 convicted under federal charges. Nobody ever tried for murder. So Bowers was one of the 7, the rest of the 18 walked. So Bowers said, his quote in the interview was, he was quite delighted to be convicted and have the main instigator of the entire affair walk out of the courtroom a free man. And he was talking about this man, Edgar Ray Killen. So I called up, and they call him locally, they call him Preacher Killen. And by the way, Preacher Killen did not go to the seminary. So anyway, so I called Preacher Killen up, and we talked for quite a while, 20, 30 minutes. And finally, at some point, he said, there's some guy in Jackson just keeps stirring things up and stirring things up and stirring things up. And I just didn't have the heart to tell him it was me. So I took him and his wife out for catfish. Like feeding them Klansman. So we went out and we ate. And I asked him if he had anything to do with the killing of 3 civil rights workers. He said no. I said, well, what do you think should happen to people that were responsible? And he said, I'm not going to say they were wrong. And then he proceeds to tell me this story about himself. When Martin Luther King was assassinated in 1968, the FBI at that moment in time had no idea who did it. Sent out FBI agents all over the country. 2 of them showed up at the doorstep of Preacher Killen, one knows whereabouts on April 4th, 1968. He wouldn't tell them. But the agent left his card. Time goes on. One day, Preacher Killen picks up the card, calls the FBI agent, wants to know who killed King. Agent's like, why do you want to know? And Killen says, man, I want to shake his hand. I have people that don't like what I do in Mississippi, probably no shock. And they'll say to me things like, Jerry, why don't you just leave these old guys alone? And you know what I tell them? These are young killers. They just happen to get old. Preacher Killen, I think I've got the next slide, will show what he's responsible for, the killing of those 3. That's where the bodies were found. But he was convicted on the exact anniversary of the killings of the 3 civil rights workers. June 21st, on 2005. The only one who's ever been tried for murder, I might add. And there are still suspects alive. The next case involved these 2 kids. Henry Hezekiah D. Charles Eddie Moore, 19 years old, Southwest Mississippi, spring of 1964. They're just trying to get a ride back home, or hitchhiking back home. And a Klansman by the name of James Ford Seal. Go ahead and forward it one. Yeah, James Ford Seal came up in a Volkswagen Bug and pulled up and, pretended to be a government agent, ordered them into the car, and so they got in the car. And unfortunately, what they didn't know is there was a whole carload of Klansmen behind them. Drove them out to a very remote area in Mississippi and beat them and beat them and beat them. Put them in the trunk of a Ford, drove to the Mississippi River, duct taped their mouths, tied their wrists, tied their ankles. One by one took them out on the boat to the middle of the river, threw them over, where they drowned. Now, if someone does something like that, don't they deserve to be punished? No matter how long it's been, 10, 20, 30. There's a reason there's no statute of limitations, right? In the summer of 2007, James Ford Seal was convicted and given 3 life sentences. To date now, just keep it there, to date now, there have been 24 convictions in these cases. And it's a matter of faith with me, but I believe God's hand has been involved in these cases. The same hate that led to these killings also led to a killing in Jackson not that long ago. Go ahead and advance it one. To this man, his name is James C. Anderson. Unfortunately, there were a band of white teenagers decided to start going into the city of Jackson, and they started beating African Americans who were homeless. And then they found James C. Anderson in a hotel parking lot about 2 in the morning, and they beat him, and then ran him over with a truck. Before people hate, they fear. And before they fear, they dehumanize, giving themselves permission to destroy, either figuratively, like we see in politics often, or in this case, literally. Go ahead and advance it, just one. Right there. You know, I've gotten dozens of threats working on these cases. But I had one Klansman said he was going to slit my throat. Another one said they had pictures of me and my family, knew where we lived. And yes, that's unnerving, but it's led to an unexpected gift. And that is the gift of living fearlessly. Living fearlessly is not about living without fear. Living fearlessly is about living beyond fear. Living fearlessly is about standing up for what's right, standing your ground. Living fearlessly means to stand up in the face of peers despising you, criticizing you, standing up if someone tells a racist joke, standing up when people degrade women. I think some of the, I'm sorry, I'm going to probably get criticism for this, but I think some of the music and language toward women right now is just appalling. We should stand up. That's part of living fearlessly. Not too long after Sam Bowers was convicted, Billy Roy Pitts testified in a hearing. When he got done, he walked to the back of the courtroom, and when he got there, he ran into the widow, Mrs. Dahmer, and several of the Dahmer children. And Billy Roy Pitts apologized to Mrs. Dahmer and asked her to forgive him for killing her husband. And she forgave him. And she began to cry. And the Dahmer children who were there began to cry. And I began to cry. And as I walked out of the courtroom that day, I felt the cool autumn breeze, and I thought about those like Vernon Dahmer who lived lives that matter. And I thought about the words on James Chaney's headstone. There are those who are alive yet will never live. Yes. Those who are dead yet will live forever. In that moment, I realized each day we are etching the words of our headstone with our lives. What will our headstone say? May God bless you. Thank you so much, friends.